This is Get Real with Bob and Stacy, the show that helps you learn about the mortgage and real estate markets. Get the inside scoop from their expert list of guests and have some fun along the way. Now, here's Bob Gallagher and Stacy Alcorn.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of Get Real with Bob and Stacy here on the Money Matters Radio Network. You're tuning in to our Leaders and Legends segment today. With us on the phone, we have Patrick Renn of Renn Wealth Management, as well as best-selling author of Finding Your Money's Greater Purpose. Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you very much.
So,
Good to be with both of you.
As a little bit of background on Patrick, he is a recognized financial educator, lecturer, and speaker who has appeared on numerous radio and television networks, including CNN, Fox, and ABC. He's a 35-year certified financial planner veteran and founder of the Renn Wealth Management Group, where he helps high net worth individuals, business owners, and professionals leave a lasting legacy by making the most of their charitable donations. So, as Bob mentioned, his best-selling book is Finding Your Money's Greater Purpose, How to Make Your Legacy Count, which reveals proven strategies that will give readers the confidence and clarity to benefit themselves, their families, their causes, institutions, and charitable organizations they care about. So Bob and I are super excited to have you today because I would say as a business owner, we constantly get asked for charitable donations and things like that. How can corporations or private donors find the right organization or cause to donate their money to?
Well, I guess that's the first place to start, isn't it? I would say that those things that you're most interested in, that you may have a connection with, your school, your community, maybe you benefited from some institution, perhaps a hospital, someone you knew or was in your family benefited, and you see a reason to support that institution. I would say that would be the first place to start, something personal.
Yep, something you're passionate about. And when it comes to charitable organizations, is there any way that a donor can make sure that their money is allocated properly?
Oh, I think that's real important. I think due diligence is paramount. I think that when I talk to charities about the importance of showing their donor what their mission accomplishes, they need to report back to the donor what the money has done. Now, you can do that very generally today on the Internet. It's required of all charities that they post their tax return and make it available to any donors or potential donors. So you can track the money pretty well on that form. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, I would say if you've got something specific, it is mandatory, in my opinion, that the charity report back to you what they did with the money.
So just out of curiosity, like for you, when you're looking, is there a benchmark that you go by and you say if a certain percentage is not used towards the end benefit of the charity that you're just not going to donate?
Yes, that's a place to start. I would tell you that what's available on the Internet is not 100% of the information you need, but it's certainly a place to start. And it'll give you the basics of how much money they're raising, what it costs them to raise the money, what they're spending in various categories, salaries, that sort of thing. But I think you need to dig a little deeper. And I would tell you, yes, for sure, if they're not using the money for the purpose intended, they shouldn't benefit from a donation.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your time with Special Olympics. How did it help shape your desire to educate and encourage the masses to invest their legacy towards charitable foundations?
Sure. I got started with Special Olympics from a neighbor of mine that was involved and got me involved. I got my two boys who at the time were much younger. They're adults today, but had them involved as volunteers. And being a financial guy, usually you're recruited to charitable boards to help them with those types of matters. And what it showed me was that there's a big difference between running an organization that has to constantly raise money to meet a budget and those that have the luxury of having reserves and an endowment, which is part of what we were involved with, was forming an endowment for the organization that would help them sustain their mission for years to come.
Interesting. What type of clients do you normally work with?
Well, they tend to be entrepreneurs, business people, some professional people, and as a result, usually they're financially successful. They reach a point in their life where they move from a point of being successful to thinking about why they're here and what their significance might be and what their eventual legacy might be. And that legacy includes family. It includes those causes and institutions that maybe helped form them. And that's a lot of what I help folks work through is what is the appropriate legacy for those different constituents that a business owner may have.
And what is your investment approach?
Well, that's very individualized. I would tell you generally that the first issue everybody needs to grapple with is there going to be enough money? You know, that's always the issue. And I think for business people, they spend the first portion of their career pouring money into their business and in the hopes that it will sustain them later, whether it's through a sale or some kind of exit strategy. So I would tell you that the business needs to be viewed just like any other investment, that it needs to be part of what helps an individual reach financial security. So that's number one, financial security. And then if we have that nailed down, then we can talk about legacy and what children, grandchildren, causes, and institutions ought to be funded.
Interesting. And do you have any charitable vehicles in place?
Well, I would tell you that there are probably none that we don't have in place. They can be very simple or very complex. You can start with cash, and you can go all the way up to using business interest to fund charitable purposes. And that's sort of the bottom and the top in terms of complexity that you can use to help fund some charitable purposes.
So when we're talking about charitable, just for my own minds, because I think about this a lot, where there's so many charities out there as opposed to there's charities and there's nonprofits. So, for example, I believe like the PGA is a nonprofit organization. And you look at that, and I mean, obviously, that doesn't seem like it's a charity. So are we talking just like charitable institutions?
Yeah, I would tell you that when I talk about it, it would not be an organization like the PGA. I would tell you that's a quasi-charitable organization. What I'm really talking about is those non-profit organizations that provide a service that might be more efficient than what government might be able to provide or what individuals might be able to provide directly, only because of their structure and the efficiency. So to me, Special Olympics, Salvation Army, those kinds of organizations provide those services at very efficient cost versus the alternatives. So that, in my mind, is what I'm talking about when I talk about charity.
And do you also help people determine, so let's just say that I'm a high net worth individual. We've had some high net worth individuals on our show. In our area, for example, we have the auto tycoon Ernie Bach Jr., who is a multi-billionaire, and he started his own foundation for music drives us to provide music and instruments to local schools. So how do you help somebody like that determine if it's in their best interest to start their own foundation or simply fund somebody else's foundation?
Sure. It's a combination of, I would say, capacity. Mm-hmm. You can certainly, if you have hundreds of millions of dollars, your own foundation might be something you would consider over something that already exists. Mm-hmm. If it's a smaller amount of money, you can actually become part of a community foundation or a donor-advised fund, as they're called, with a number of institutions, including financial institutions, for as little as $5,000.
Wow.
And you can accomplish some of the same types of things, obviously not in the same manner, but you can do pretty much what a foundation does.
And do you typically advise your clients to donate primarily during their lifetime or after death?
Well, they do both. I would tell you that there is a great, in my mind, advantage both economically from a tax viewpoint and also, I think, emotionally and from the point of view of satisfaction to give while you're here to see what happens.
Right.
I think that's, I would encourage that. Certainly.
Right, so you can get to see the change that you're making.
And
you can see the change. That's exactly right.
And Pat, for the average people listening right now that want to make regular donations to local charities or even national ones, what's a good rule of thumb as far as what percentage of the money should go back to the actual charity instead of, versus the administrative costs?
Yeah, I would tell you that it needs to be pretty high. I would say that those that are in the 75% plus category are the ones that you ought to focus on. It's not the whole story. There are some organizations that have high operating costs for various reasons, but have dramatic effect. So I would tell you that you have to balance the operating part of it with the effectiveness part of it. Mm-hmm. The operating part gets a lot of attention and press, and many times deservedly so because they're not efficient. But it's not the whole story. So I would tell you have to dig down a little bit.
So can you give us some examples of donations that have provided you with a great amount of satisfaction?
Oh, sure. I would tell you that when I was involved with Special Olympics, not only the money, but the fact that I have two sons, and I would spend one weekend. We would have, and they still do, of course, a winter games and a summer games, and they were typically in another location. We would travel to do that. So I would take one son, spend the weekend in the winter, and the other son spend one weekend in the summer. And I was able to also meet some people in town that I got involved with Special Olympics, and you could definitely see the result of that work. You can see the effect it had on families. You could see the effect it had on children. And, this is something that stays with you for an awfully long time. I've had similar experiences with a couple of schools here with scholarships and with my church. In terms of funding, we funded a Hispanic ministry. So all that speaks to the fact that you can do some of this, get a lot of satisfaction seeing the results, and you don't have to die to win, which a lot of people think you do.
Interesting. And I also think I sit on several boards for local charities, and at the end of the day, not only do you get to help a great cause, I'm the president of our local Habitat for Humanity and involved with a couple other local boards, you end up making really unbelievable, lasting business connections with like-minded people, too.
Yeah, and I tell you, that is a reason for me to be involved in this area. I some years ago took a look at my business from a planning perspective to see where our focus ought to be over the next really decades. And what I saw was a common thread that we had helped a lot of folks in this area. We had met a lot of people by being on boards, and a lot of our clients were chairmen and had high positions on boards and helped the local community. And there seemed to be a thread there. I never solicited a single client from a board. I didn't want to get the reputation of, that guy that's on the board handing out business cards. But it's natural.
Right.
I'm in that business, and people would ask me about it. And so, yes, I would tell you that that's a reason for business people many times to be involved.
All right. So we only have about 1 minute left. Can you give us, are there ways for donors to combine basically their long-term charitable goals with their personal financial security?
Yes, I think some of this is beyond the scope of just conversation. It requires some analysis, but you can certainly meet some retirement objectives by donating to charity, waiting a while, having the charity pay you basically what amounts to be retirement income, and then after you've passed on from this life, the money that remains would go to charity. That's a simple tactic that a lot of people use. If you have a very concentrated position in either a stock that's traded on the stock exchange, or a business interest, or a real estate interest, and it needs to be diversified and you need more income, you can donate that, get a current tax deduction, and free up some money in terms of income, and the tax deduction gives you, in effect, money back in your pocket. So those are a couple of the things that are pretty popular that a lot of advisors know about, and a lot of clients, donors, are not as familiar with them as maybe they should be.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today. That was Patrick Renn. His book, best-selling book, Finding Your Money's Greater Purpose, How to Make Your Legacy Count. You can check him out at Renn, RENN, wealth.com.
Thanks again, Pat. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more Get Real with Bob and Stacy after this.